Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, he has been shunned by his KwaZulu-Natal province, but has become a force to be reckoned with. Former ANC KwaZulu-Natal Secretary Mdumiseni Ntuli got over 1,200 nominations for the position of ANC Secretary-General. He's far ahead of fellow nominees, former Eastern Cape ANC Chairperson Pumullo Masuale and former ANC Youth League President Fikile Mbalula. They each got fewer than 900 nominations. Now, Mr. Ntuli joins us for more on this. Mr. Ntuli, good morning and thank you very much for your time. Firstly, congratulations on your nomination. How does it feel to know your name is going to be on the ballot, especially as a candidate who had not necessarily gotten his province's backing?
Good morning, and thanks a lot for having us on your program this morning. I must say it is certainly with profound gratitude and a great sense of humility that one has accepted the nomination from different structures of our movement, branches in particular throughout the country. I'm really very honored. I've welcomed this nomination with the greatest level of human humility, because I know that it communicates a particular message about what the rank and files in the ANC feel about their organization and the direction that they believe it ought to take.
Has there been any communication, though, between yourself and the KZN PEC post that announcement of candidates?
Not formally, but last week Sunday, myself and the Provincial Secretary, Comrade Mdumiseni, were working together throughout the day for the by-election campaign. And of course, naturally, we had some moments where we exchanged ideas about how to consolidate the unit of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal as the biggest home of the African National Congress, and how to position ourselves in such a manner that we don't go to the national conference and get the repeat of what occurred in 2017, where because of our internal challenges, we were unable to have any of us being elected in the top six. But that was just an informal conversation between me and one of our leaders. I'm quite certain that at a certain point in time, it is inevitable that the outcome of the nomination has invited a reflection on all of us who are genuine members of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal and the leadership of the ANC, because it's less important on who gets elected and much more profoundly imperative that whatever happens must leave the organization solid, consolidated, and ready to face the battles ahead.
Now, some would say you are a tried and tested cadre of your movement. In the not-so-distant past, you were the provincial spokesperson, then most recently the provincial secretary. So what does Mdumiseni Ntuli, with all his political experience, bring to the Secretary-General's office, if you were to get in, which some say has somewhat lost its stature?
I had a privilege, a very rare privilege, to be the national organizer of the African National Congress for a period of almost a decade before I went back to KwaZulu-Natal to occupy responsibilities in the provincial leadership of the ANC. But I also think that the advantage of having been the provincial secretary of the biggest province of the ANC, both in terms of the electoral support as well as the membership of the ANC, exposes one to the complexity of the challenges facing the African National Congress and how to manage this important and big family called the ANC, and manage it in the best interest not of its own or of itself, but of the great masses of our people who place their hopes and aspirations on the African National Congress as a trusted and a preeminent leader of the social transformation in our country. So I think one is coming on board with that kind of an experience, but also you may have heard this. I think I belong to a generation of relatively young comrades who are not very ambitious to occupy positions in government, but who are quite concerned about the quality and the future of the African National Congress, and who have placed their skills and energies before the disposal of the movement in order to contribute to that strategic task of the renewal of the ANC, which requires principled, dedicated, committed cadres who understand the Congress movement and the Congress strategy.
Now, as the ANC, you've prided yourselves in being a broad church with individuals from different political persuasions. You've got your ultra-lefts, your centrists, and those on the right. So many would have different views on addressing a number of its issues. For instance, the Eskom crisis, which has subjected us to power cuts daily. We hear from the DPE that there's a decision on further allocation of funds for diesel. It's an imminent one. But the situation is untenable. Where do you stand on this Eskom crisis?
I think the most important thing is that, over decades now, for more than a century, the ANC has had this capacity to manage successfully the contradictions that are within the organization, because it is what has kept the ANC actually moving forward successfully. It has been surging ahead because of the strength and ability to manage those contradictions. What we have lost in the recent past, which is also a reflection of what is happening in Eskom and other parastatals, is the center and the central authority which must come from the headquarters of the ANC, that is Ntuli House, which is not only giving a direction on the policies, but ensuring that the policies that are implemented by the ANC-led government are consistent with the overall strategic objective of the African National Congress, which is not only an ANC vision or an agenda, but an agenda that is deeply entrenched in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. That is why at times many of us get concerned when ministers are disagreeing about whether we should take the option of the coal or whether we should go to a different direction in terms of the energy mix. That is a reflection of a declining capacity of the center to give direction and ensure that everybody speaks on the basis of a common and coherent message about what needs to be done.
Because these are your deployees, and one would think as an SG, you would have that opportunity to summon the deployees in these state-owned entities and ask exactly what is the direction you're taking. But particularly if we look at just transition right now, there is that whole conversation. Those on the left would say you've got an abundance of coal in the country, you've got to preserve jobs. So whatever the transition will look like, it's got to take into account our unique position as a country. But there are those that are pushing that we have no choice. We have got to actually find ourselves moving with the rest of the world and move to cleaner energy, and possibly at the expense of our economy or the likes of Mpumalanga.
Look, it's quite correct that we have to ensure that we're not left behind in the ongoing transition that is taking place throughout the world, because we're part of a global community, and therefore we have a responsibility to ensure that we participate in that process, but in a manner that reinforces our own advantage. So the question and the sentiments about the fact that we must look at our own competitive advantage. If coal, as it is the case, is our competitive advantage, what is it that we do? How to ensure that what in the ANC we call the balance of evidence? What is it that we need to do, and how should we be doing it in such a manner that ensures that we don't lose the capacity of that which is a competitive advantage for South Africa, but equally we're not left behind in this moving global boat, which will not wait for us. It's forever on the move and it's in motion. But we have to enter and participate in a manner that protects our own national interest. Preserving jobs, protecting jobs in this country is far more important in my own view than any decision that we may have to take. Of course, we are part of the global community. We have signed to certain treaties about how to ensure that we contribute towards the protection of our ecosystem as well as our common earth as human beings. But how we enter into that process must not in any way disadvantage us, because there's our own strength must be the basis upon which we participate in the global discourse and ensure that it favors our own advantage as a country and the people.
And then on coalitions, analysts have told us that coalitions are here to stay. President Ramaphosa, in his closing address at the last NEC, acknowledged that they create a lot of instability. We're actually monitoring a vote of no confidence today in Johannesburg. They're creating instability, you acknowledge, but very little was said around how they can be stabilized in the interests of citizens. Do you think perhaps there's a need to have some sort of legislation to manage these coalitions that binds political parties, similar to what the Democratic Alliance is now proposing?
I think the first thing that the ANC has to do as the governing party and the leading party in this country, because in various places where the ANC has to enter into some form of a cooperation or coalitions of one form or another, it is usually the ANC that is the biggest party, because we won the majority of votes throughout South Africa. And then we get into a challenge because of the PR proportional allocation of the seat. The first thing that the ANC has to do, which we haven't done, and I think part of the reason that we may have neglected this aspect is because we did not quite anticipate that the level of decline in the support of the ANC would be in such an extent that we will go this faster to the route of coalition. We don't have an ANC political perspective, adopted political perspective, which must define who should we cooperate with in an environment where we are not having the capacity to govern on our own. Politically, because some of these coalitions, the reason why they are not stable, firstly, they are not based on a shared ideological position. They are not based on a shared value system about what needs to be done. They are not even based on a common view about the aspects of our respective manifestos. In many instances, it's just an arrangement between people who happen to be close to one another, or organizations that feel we can work with this one and not the other one. The ANC, as a leading party, firstly must define politically what we understand and how should we participate in the coalition politics. And of course, that may result ultimately into the ANC influencing a direction around the kind of legislation that must be enacted in order to ensure that we achieve stability. But let me just conclude by saying, personally, I think that the ANC has to do everything possible and within its own power to ensure that it brings about a reduction of this coalition. And the how part of doing that is to consolidate the unit of the ANC, is to effectively implement our own manifesto. Because the reason why people don't vote the ANC in the majority is because of our own internal conflict, our internal fight, but our own inability to produce quality leadership that ensures that the manifesto and the commitments we've made to our people are effectively implemented.
And some would even go as far as saying, when you guys are together and you discuss a lot of the policy, you most certainly talk left, but when you get to government, those deployed in government do something completely different. For instance, when we talk the nationalization of the Reserve Bank, this was a resolution of yours, but we've recently heard your Treasurer-General stating in one interview that it would be impractical right now. 50 billion possibly to buy out some of those shareholders. Is it really something that is practical? He seems to be of the belief, no, it's not. And he's also of the belief that really the presence of those shareholders impacts the Reserve Bank in no way whatsoever, nor does the mandate need to be changed to focus on employment creation. So what happens in that instance when you have that confusion, or an instance where you're talking left in the political party, but really when it comes practically to implementing, it doesn't necessarily happen?
My own view is that there's quite a few things that we need to deal with in order to achieve the renewal of the African National Congress. You see, when we go to a conference like we're going to be doing that in the next 2 weeks, majority of us, many of us, of course, there are others who may be expert on a variety of fields that we'll be discussing the conference, but a lot of us are activists, are committed activists and revolutionaries who are determined to see South Africa embarking effectively on the reconstruction and transformation of our country. But what is lacking, which we need to address as the oldest liberation movement, after conference, it is my considered view that we should not just emerge from conference and run towards the implementation of the resolution. The capacity we must build in the head office and the partnership that we must enter to with strategic think tanks in our country must help us to say, after the conference, here are the resolutions of conference. What is it that we can do within the next 12 months? What is it that can be done the next 5? Because in the ANC, we work on the basis of what we call the balance of evidence. But if you emerge from the conference and you leave the resolutions with those who are deployed in government, it is almost inevitable that when they are confronted by the reality that emanates from the implementation of the resolution, you are bound to have contradictory messages about whether it was a right or a wrong resolution. But if the ANC emerges from the conference and sit back and say, this is what we have decided upon, which of these resolutions can be implemented within a year, which one within 3 years, which one within 5 years, which one may be even not implemented by this current leadership, but will have to be part of our agenda for the next 10 years. Once you have done that, you are then able to communicate a coherent and a message that is convincing to the rest of the public that you know what you are going to do and how you are going. You are not dependent on the intelligence of those who are deployed in government alone, or ministers, or the director generals. But as a party, you are able to say, yes, of course, we've made these decisions, but this is the time frame within which we can implement this and that and the other. We don't have that in the ANC at the moment. And it's a challenge that as part of the renewal of the ANC, we have to address that deficiency, because it creates a lot of problems. Some within our own ranks assumes populist stance. They take one resolution and they say, you failed to implement this resolution, without even conducting a detailed assessment of the material conditions that may dictate it otherwise, which may have not been obtaining at the time when you were at the conference and making a decision of that nature.
Speaking of taking into account material conditions that exist at a particular time, your handling of former President Zuma's incarceration, there was even just the attending of his court cases. There was obviously an instruction that came from National about how matters pertaining to the former president would be handled, perhaps with little appreciation of the material conditions that you guys were dealing with. In hindsight, just looking at that situation where you pride yourselves in democratic centralism, that a decision taken at the top must be implemented, do you think perhaps that was poorly handled? There should have perhaps been a situation where they come to the ground and sort of familiarize themselves with the environment of KwaZulu-Natal and the personality of the former president before taking any decision about how you as the province should have handled that matter?
No, I don't think that the NEC did anything wrong. Remember that the NEC was essentially enforcing and communicating a decision that had been taken a few months back by the National Conference of the organization, which had said that none of us must be seen in court on behalf of the ANC to accompany or to support anybody that has been charged or is accused of corruption or any serious crime. So the NEC was implementing that decision. It was ourselves as the ANC leadership in KwaZulu-Natal who went back to the National Executive Committee and said, yes, we respect this decision. It's a decision of conference, and we're quite committed to implement. We've attempted to do so over the past few months, but this is our live experience. We think that as an organization that always have to move on the basis of understanding the concrete material conditions on the ground, there is a need for us to change the course on this matter. If we don't do so, events are going to overtake us, and it may result in what is called badly unintended consequences to the ANC. For instance, just want to end by saying to you, we in the ANC, this thing of material conditions. You see, if I live here and I walk into the traffic light that is open for me to cross as a pedestrian, and somebody who's driving doesn't stop, you can't say because this one who's driving is wrong, I'm going to insist and cross. He must crash and kill me if it happens, as long as I die on the correct side of the situation. It doesn't work like that. The ANC works on the basis of the balance of evidence, but it analyzes the concrete material conditions, because ultimately it must ensure that nothing happens which will undermine its ability to provide strategic leadership to its own membership and society in general.